Welcome. So we're presently looking at Journey Without Goal by Chögyam Trungpa. And the value of a study like this is essentially that it enables us to develop what we call the view, the perspective, which is essentially the knowledge of the validity and relevance of what we're doing in terms of the practice. So we'd say on one hand we have view, which is the understanding and the perspective of what needs to be done, how we're going to do it, and what the objective of the path is. And then we have practice, and practice is then meditation and integrating the view. And this also extends then into everyday life, where we also integrate the view in our ordinary living. So everything that we're doing when we're studying is really intended to not just remain something that we listen to and it becomes part of our opinions and our ideas, but actually something that is part of the whole process of transforming our being. Now, when we say transforming, it doesn't really mean that we're going to become something else. It's rather that we transform in the sense that we unveil a natural disposition that's basically there and which is basic to all sentient creatures. So in that sense, what we could call the path is really just a means to unveil what's naturally there. But of course, there is a sense of transformation in the sense that that our ordinary habitual patterns cease to have this grip on us. Our ordinary habitual projections, our belief in our projections, and our you could say impulses on the basis of our projections cease to have less power over us. So of course all of that comes back to essentially removing a cognitive delusional assumption that holds this notion of I, me, and the phenomenal world as solid. And this is where the Buddha comes in and says things don't exist the way that they appear. So we have, of course, a whole range of teachings that operate with the process of gradually thinning out our delusion. But the tantric path is extraordinary in that it operates with a recognition of this innate disposition that's already perfected. And that innate disposition is not something that we necessarily would know just on the basis of our own assumptions about what the path might be about. It very much comes from a context of learning and apprenticing with someone who has the complete experience. And that's where then in the Vajrayana we have the teacher. The role of the teacher is very much that of being a guru. So with guru we mean someone who has a lot of weight, a lot of authenticity. And so with the guru we surrender, and there's a process that we engage with the teacher in which we're connecting with the teacher's authenticity and inspired by the teacher's authenticity to be authentic to ourselves. Now this ourselves doesn't mean our habitual way of being how we like to be, but it's discovering a richness and a wealth that's innate to us, which is not necessarily owned by it is not owned by our ordinary insecurity and wishful thinking. So the teacher is immensely important. So whenever we're doing this study here, we begin with this devotional chant called Crying to the Gurus. And we've gone through teachers from what we call the eight lineages of, or rather the 8 chariots of the practice lineage. And these are essentially 8 lineages that we had in Tibet, which emphasize, or rather had their own particular styles of practice. And in the 19th century, Jamgon Kongtrul Lodrotai, who wrote this together with Jamin Khyentse Wangpo and some other masters, very much intended to highlight the validity of all these different traditions. So rather than sort of competing or thinking my lineage is better than the others, there was very much a sense that all the various lineages, they really fulfill a particular role in terms of accommodating the different dispositions and inclinations that the students might have. So we looked at representatives and key figures in these 8 lineages, and now we're at really the last of the lineage masters, which is then our own root guru. So here we write, Jamgon Kongtrul writes, "Kind root guru, think of me. Look upon me from the top of my head, the place of great bliss. May I meet my own mind, the face of Dharmakaya, and attain Buddhahood in one lifetime." So, kind root guru, well, first of all, like I said before, root guru or guru very much represents somebody who has authenticity in terms of just being genuine, and as such is not a lightweight. Like you could have somebody who has a lot of great ideas and a lot of great sort of creativity of various kinds, but actually to be genuine and to be genuinely connected with an unconditional quality of awakening really provides tremendous power, tremendous authenticity, and tremendous weight. So that's where guru stands as opposed to sort of the more lightweight enterprises of confusion. Root guru refers to the main teacher, and kind is significant in that the guru is not somebody who we just learn from, and then we've gleaned some information that makes us better, more glorious, more enlightened, or whatever. But it's somebody that we forever actually hold in esteem. So there's an appreciation for the teacher, which only grows as time goes by. There's a famous story about Milarepa when he was. No, it was when Gampopa, who had been studying, Milarepa's student, Gampopa, when he had been with Milarepa for quite a few years. Then at one point he went off, and this was the departure. He didn't see Milarepa again, and then he asks Milarepa, because he was already a very accomplished master at this point. He says, ask Milarepa, when do you think I should teach others? And Milarepa says, there will be a time when you recognize the kindness of your teacher to a greater degree, and that will be the time when you're ready to teach. And then Milarepa actually proceeded to give him his very last pith instruction, which was he pulled up his skirt and basically mooned him, and showing him his buttocks, which were just calloused and hard like leather, implying that practice will only come on the basis of actually sitting and meditating. And from that, then realization comes. And so with these pith instructions, then Gampopa set off. But it is very much the sense that in the Buddhist teaching, apart perhaps from the Buddha, but even so, we would say that nobody is a self-made man or woman. There's not this sense that I did it my way. There's very much the sense of indebtedness to the teachers being the most significant person in our existence, because the teacher shows us what is authentic. So that's why we venerate the teacher on the top of our heads, the place of great bliss, the Mahasukha chakra, and of course the teacher is not somebody that's idolized externally, but someone that introduces our own mind as the Dharmakaya. So the teacher ultimately is not external. The teacher is the Dharmakaya, and the external teacher is the reflection of the Dharmakaya, showing us what we have within at a time when we're not able to actually see it ourselves, then there's the external manifestation of the teacher who shows us this quality of the Dharmakaya. And it's within that vision, and again coming back to the view, it's with that understanding of what the Dharmakaya is, that Buddhahood in one lifetime is very much a possibility. Buddhahood is not seen as some mysterious entity far out in the unknown future, but very much a reality that is integrated presently, which is then why we in the Vajrayana talk about the resultant vehicle of the Vajrayana. So taking the objective of the path as the very foundation. So this is where the root guru is absolutely indispensable, and it's within that space of recognizing the kindness of the root guru and having that devotion then that we begin to be sensitive to a dimension that lies beyond our ordinary imagination and our ordinary conceptual mind. So a little bit, this is then the root guru. And so on your left, you have Dilgu Rinpoche. This is a picture taken in the 1950s when Rinpoche visited Lhasa together with his teacher, Jamyang Khyentse Chögyam. Okay, the 5 Buddha families. So, Trungpa Rinpoche says, Tantra is extraordinarily special and extremely real and personal. The question in this chapter is how to relate our own ordinary existence or daily situation to tantric consciousness. The tantric approach is not just to make sweeping statements about reality and to create calmness and a meditative state. It is more than learning to be creative and contemplative. In Tantra, we relate to the details of our everyday life according to our own particular makeup. It is a real and personal experience. But in order to relate to our lives in the tantric fashion, there are certain technical details of tantric experience that we have to understand. Now, in the chapters leading up to this point, we've discussed Buddha nature. We've discussed how to relate to the supporting circumstance of us beginning to experience Buddha nature, which is the teacher. And we've looked at how we could begin to understand and relate to integrating this vision of Buddha nature and this vision of integrating the wisdom of the teacher in terms of our path, in terms of sadhana. Trungpa Rinpoche hasn't specifically mentioned sadhana, and of course this is a work which is very much about understanding the general spirit of what we're doing on the path. But nevertheless, we can say that those of us who are familiar with tantric sadhana, we can find how the aspects of tantric sadhana are represented in these chapters. And so we have the chapter on visualization, understanding the notion of samaya sattva and jhana sattva. And then we've also looked at body, speech, and mind. And all of these are very much about us having a real experience of what awakening is like, what awakening is, and integrating this. And so presently also then the discussion about the 5 families is again more and more, and that's the thing about the tantric path, is we more and more integrate our entire everyday lived experience. The entire phenomenal world is our path. So we don't retreat into some particular state. We very much relate to our phenomenal world, but we're opening up and beginning to discover things about the phenomenal world. And particularly what's meant with that is that we're discovering awakening as it spontaneously exists within ourselves and within our experience. And that is, of course, the whole nature of Tantra, that awakening is present and very much on the basis of the blessing of the teacher, the presence of the teacher, and the teacher's instructions. this becomes something very, very real. So the details that we're going to be looking at here has a lot to do with something that's taking place right now, right here and now. And Trungpa Rinpoche's style of communicating, being so much familiar with the vernacular of the modern world, is very much capable of and intending to for us to actually begin to look at this right now. It's not as if we're learning something about some Buddhist or Tibetan or Indian practices that we can then say, oh yeah, now I know something about what those Buddhists, they think about Tantra. It's very much about us beginning to be privy to and sensitive to an immediate reality. So this is very much the Vajrayana, in the sense of taking this objective of the path as something that can be known right now, presently. So Trungpa Rinpoche says the tantric discipline of relating to life is based on what are known as the 5 Buddha principles, the 5 Buddha families. These principles are traditionally known as families because they are an extension of ourselves in the same way that our blood relations are an extension of ourselves. We have our daddy, we have our mommy, we have our sisters and brothers, and they're all part of our family. But we could also say that these relatives are principles, our motherness, our fatherness, our sisterness, our brotherness, our meanness, our experience as definite principles that have distinct characteristics. In the same way, the Tantric tradition speaks of 5 families, 5 principles, categories, or possibilities. The thing is, we have a sense of our mother, we have a sense of our father, brothers, etc. All those that we're related to in terms of family, and they all have their own external existence, but we're interpreting and we're relating to them as something that they play roles in our particular lives, and they become part of us. So there's very much a sense when we talk about family in the Buddhist sense that we're talking about something that's an innate disposition. So Trungpa Rinpoche continues, those 5 principles or Buddha families are called Vajra, Ratna, Padma, Karma, and Buddha. They're quite ordinary. There is nothing divine or extraordinary about them. The basic point is that at the tantric level, people are divided into particular types, Vajra, Ratna, Padma, Karma, and Buddha. We constantly come across members of every one of the 5 families, people who are partially or completely one of those 5. We find such people all through life, and every one of them is a fertile person, a workable person who could be treated with directly and personally. So from the tantric point of view, by relating directly with all the different people we encounter, we're actually relating with different styles of enlightenment. The Buddha family or families associated with a person describes his or her fundamental style, that person's intrinsic perspectives or stance in perceiving the world and working with it. Each family is associated with both a neurotic and an enlightened style. The neurotic expression of any Buddha family can be transmuted into its wisdom or enlightened aspect. As well as describing people's styles, the Buddha families are also associated with colors, elements, landscape, directions, seasons, with any aspect of the phenomenal world. So like Trungpa mentions elsewhere, it's not as if with the Buddha families, all of a sudden we're beginning to then say, just like we would say with the people of the zodiac, oh, you're just such a Virgo, or oh, that was such a Libra way of seeing things, or we're not really doing that. It's more for us to begin to actually discern the enlightened potential and the enlightened quality that permeates the phenomenal world. And Trungpa the style of Trungpa is very much approaching this in terms of the psychology. So we're very much talking in terms of intuitive appreciation of ourselves and others and the phenomenal world. But we can also see the entire universe in terms of existing on the basis of these 5 elements, and we would say the construction of ourselves as individuals exists on the basis of these 5 families. The phenomenal world in terms of the and so yes, so ourselves as individuals constructed as enlightened, or rather constructed through these 5 Buddha families, are associated with the 5 skandhas. And likewise also the phenomenal world, which is, you could say, constructed according to the 5 elements, can also be seen as the 5 families. So we understand the entire range of the entire universe really exists in terms of these 5 families, and also the experiences that come with that. So we talk about the 5 families, but then also we talk about the mandala of the bodhisattvas and so on that are associated with that, but in terms of how they exist in their intrinsic nature. So the intrinsic nature of who we are in terms of our being, our personality, our skandhas, and the intrinsic nature of the phenomenal world is understood in terms of the Buddha families as intrinsically pure. And that's where then, when this reality is filtered through the insecurity and delusional neurosis, then the world is diminished into what we call samsara. And that's where we then, rather than experience, you could say, the field of awakening and the field of others, and essentially the non-dual display in terms of all the colors and the wisdom and the various dimensions of enlightenment, or the non-confused condition, then the entire range of reality is seen in terms of just our neurotic aspect. So that's where transformation is a very real possibility, because that is essentially us returning to what was already there. So we talk about transmutation in Tantra very much from the point of view of not changing things as such, but really just discovering their actual nature. So that's where the tantric vision is very much based on understanding things as they actually are. So that's where this, of course, this whole principle of the 5 Buddha families applies to the elements, to all aspects really of the phenomenal world. So now Trungpa is going to talk a little bit about each of these 5 families in terms of their energy and their qualities and so forth. So he says the first Buddha family is the Vajra family, which literally means the family of sharpness, crystallization, and indestructibility. The term Vajra is superficially translated as diamond, but that is not quite accurate. Traditionally, Vajra is a celestial precious stone that cuts through any other solid object. So it is more than a diamond, it's complete indestructibility. The Vajra family is symbolized by the Vajra scepter, or dorje in Tibetan. This Vajra scepter, or super diamond, has 5 prongs, which represent relating to the 5 emotions: aggression, pride, passion, jealousy, and ignorance. The sharp edges, or prongs, of the Vajra represent cutting through any neurotic emotional tendencies. They also represent the sharp quality of being aware of many possible perspectives. The indestructible Vajra is said to be like a heap of razor blades. If we naively try to hold it or touch it, there are all kinds of sharp edges that are both cutting and penetrating. The notion here is that Vajra corrects or remedies any neurotic distortion in a precise and sharp way. So there's a story about a rishi who sat, I think it was on Mount Kailash, for a year or so, meditating. And at one point then his bones turned into this indestructible quality, or this indestructible Vajra material. And Indra then took the rishi left this body, but his body still, or you could say the rishi's, went into a sort of a formless absorption. And Indra then took the bones of this body, and he created this scepter. So this is where we talk about the Vajra as a scepter, but the quality of it, this diamond quality, is then that it is indestructible. Now this also Vajra, this is where also Vajra becomes the metaphor for Buddha nature, or the image of Buddha nature, in the sense that Buddha nature is indestructible. It's something unconditional. So that's where the awakened quality is associated with Vajra, and this is also where the path of bringing this awakened nature as becomes this, when this awakened nature becomes the scope of our journey, then it's unconditional, and in no way does it submit to or is influenced by the insecurity and you could say the mediocrity of our ordinary habitual mind. And that's where the journey has this quality of being sharp, being real, penetrating. So that's where the Vajrayana then takes its name from this Vajra quality. It's something that doesn't allow for neurotic distortion. So Trungpa says, in the ordinary world, the experience of Vajra is perhaps not as extreme as holding razor blades in our hand, but at the same time, it is penetrating and very personal. It is like a sharp, cutting, biting cold winter. Each time we expose ourselves to the open air, we get frostbite instantly. Intellectually, Vajra is very sharp. All the intellectual traditions belong to this family. A person in the Vajra family knows how to evaluate logically the arguments that are used to explain experience. He can tell whether the logic is true or false. Vajra family intellect also has a sense of constant openness and perspective. For instance, a Vajra person could view a crystal ball from hundreds of perspectives, according to where it was placed, the way it was perceived, the distance from which he or she was looking at it, and so forth. The intellect of the Vajra family is not just encyclopedic. It is sharpness, directness, and awareness of perspectives. Such indestructibility and sharpness are very personal and very real. So that's also where we would say that this quality of Vajra is basic to us understanding the nature of the view, the path. Because if we have this logical assessment of what we're doing, if we're sort of equipped with the skepticism that's basic to logical inquiry, then we arrive at an insight that is indestructible. It's like we know that 2 and 2 is 4, and it doesn't really matter whether the sun is shining or not. This is something that's undeniably real. We can assess this is true. So not that we're sort of we're asserting the nature of our conclusion on the basis of how we feel. It's just very simple, indestructible, clear, undeniably how it is. So that's what this is where we talk about the Vajra intellect as something that allows us to have firm ground of insight into things, how they actually are. So that's the quality of this Vajra intellect. The neurotic, Trungpa Rinpoche continues, the neurotic expression of Vajra is associated with anger and intellectual fixation. If we become fixated on a particular logic, the sharpness of Vajra can become rigidity. We can become possessive of our insight rather than having a sense of open perspective. The anger of Vajra neurosis could be pure aggression or also a sense of uptightness because we're so attached to our sharpness of mind. Vajra is also associated with the element of water. Cloudy, turbulent water symbolizes the defensive and aggressive nature of anger, while clear water suggests the sharp, precise, clear reflectiveness of Vajra wisdom. In fact, Vajra wisdom is traditionally called the mirror-like wisdom, which evokes this image of a calm pond or reflecting pool. So the neurotic Vajra rigidity is then when we become determine that our opinion is the right opinion, and our view is the right view, and our practices and culture and so on should apply elsewhere. So it can go into this rather sort of limited, rigid uptightness. So in its clarity, then it begins to become, you could say, rigid. And so where the sharpness then, instead of just being clear, just becomes more aggressive. So this is, of course, when this quality of sharpness is filtered through the insecurity of ego. But when there's the absence of this insecurity, then it is the appreciation of this open clarity of seeing phenomena as they are. So that's why we call it the mirror-like. This is associated with the mirror-like wisdom. Trungpa then continues, incidentally, the use of the term Vajra in such words as Vajrayana, Vajra Master, and Vajra Pride does not refer to this particular Buddha family, but simply expresses basic indestructibility. So of course that's where Vajra then, as we have it in Vajrayana, then comes from the universal understanding of this indestructible nature. The next Buddha family is Ratna. Ratna is a personal and real sense of expanding ourselves and enriching our environment. It is expansion, enrichment, plentifulness. Such plentifulness could also have the problems and weaknesses. In the neurotic sense, the richness of Ratna manifests as being completely fat or extraordinarily ostentatious, beyond the limits of our sanity. We expand constantly, open heedlessly, and indulge ourselves to the level of insanity. It is like swimming in a dense lake of honey and butter. When we coat ourselves in this mixture of butter and honey, it's very difficult to remove. We cannot just remove it by wiping it off, but we have to apply all kinds of cleaning agents. So as cleanser and soap, such as cleanser and soap, to loosen its grasp. So Ratna is associated with this richness, this extraordinary degree of wealth. Trungpa continues, in the positive expression of the Ratna family, the principle of richness is extraordinary. We feel very rich and plentiful, and we extend ourselves to our world personally, directly, emotionally, psychologically, even spiritually. We are extending constantly, expanding like a flood or an earthquake. There is a sense of spreading, shaking the earth and creating more and more cracks in it. That is the powerful expansiveness of Ratna. So of course, this is something that we have in the phenomenal world. We have incredible forces that actually expand at the time of springtime, when things are growing, when things are expanding. And also we have this in terms of our own life, in terms of the movements that create growth and so forth. So this is something that is innate really in terms of the phenomenal world, this quality of Ratna. And also we can see the whole phenomenal world in terms of this, you could say this larder, or this cornucopia of incredible variety and richness. Trungpa then says, the enlightened expression of Ratna is called the wisdom of equanimity, because Ratna can include everything in its expansive environment. Thus, Ratna is associated with the element of earth. It is like a rotting log that makes itself at home in the country. Such a log does not want to leave its home ground. It would like to stay, but at the same time, it grows all kinds of mushrooms and plants and allows animals to nest in it. That lazy settling down and making ourselves at home and inviting other people to come in and rest as well is Ratna. The next family is Padma, which literally means lotus flower. The symbol of the enlightened Padma family is the lotus, which grows and blooms in the mud, yet comes out pure and clean, virginal and clear. Padma neurosis is connected with passion, a grasping quality and a desire to possess. We're completely wrapped up in desire and want only to seduce the world without concern for real communication. We could be a hustler or an advertiser, but basically we're like a peacock. In fact, Amitabha Buddha, the Buddha of the Padma family, traditionally sits on a peacock, which represents subjugating Padma neurosis. A person with Padma neurosis speaks gently, fantastically gently, and he or she is seemingly very sexy, kind, magnificent, and completely accommodating. If you hurt me, that's fine. That is part of our love affair. Come towards me. Such Padma seduction becomes excessive and sometimes becomes compassionate, depending on how we work with it. So Padma is this quality of appreciation, of loving the detail and the phenomenon. We associate this with also with the wisdom of discerning. So when it's neurotic, it becomes about possession, but when it's not neurotic, it is about discerning and appreciating the details. By the way, the Buddha Amitabha sitting on a peacock, yes, we would say when we represent the 5 families, we would say they sit on thrones, but these thrones are held up by different animals. So in the case of the Vajra family, they're held up by lions. In the case of the Ratna family, what are they held up with? I forget. In the case of the Padma family, they're held up by peacocks. In the case of the Buddha family, they're held up by elephants and so forth. So just so you're not thinking that Buddha Amitabha is sitting squishing a poor peacock. Anyway, Padma is associated with the element of fire. In the confused state, fire does not distinguish among the things it grasps, burns, and destroys. But in the awakened state, the heat of passion is transmuted into warmth of compassion. When Padma neurosis is transmuted, it becomes fantastically precise and aware. It turns into tremendous interest and inquisitiveness. Everything is seen in its own distinct way, with its own particular qualities and characteristics. Thus, the wisdom of Padma is called discriminating awareness wisdom. The genuine character of Padma seduction is real openness, a willingness to demonstrate what we have and what we are to the phenomenal world. What we bring to the world is a sense of pleasure, a sense of promise. In whatever we experience, we begin to feel there's lots of promise. We constantly experience a sense of magnetization and spontaneous hospitality. Incidentally, also, when you come across Tibetan Buddhism, and perhaps more specifically Buddhism in general, there's a lot of Buddhist practice and Buddhist culture that is aimed and practiced within the context of the enlightened quality of the Padma family. So you have, within Chinese Buddhism, you have a lot of aspiration to be born within the realm of the Buddha Amitabha. And in Tibetan Buddhism, and particularly then the Nyingma tradition, Guru Padmasambhava, Guru, as his name implies, born from a lotus, is associated with the Padma family and the quality of imbuing the phenomenal world and appreciating the phenomenal world in terms of its primordial enlightenment. And very much this quality of warmth and extending one's appreciation and delight in the phenomenal world. So this we find a lot in the Nyingma and also in the Buddhist tradition in general. The Tibetan Buddhist tradition in general. The approach of the Padma family. Trungpa then says the quality of Padma is like bathing in perfume or jasmine tea. Each time we bathe, we feel refreshed, fantastic. It feels good to be magnetized. The sweet air is fantastic, and the hospitality of our host is magnificent. We eat the good food provided by our host, which is delicious, but not too filling. We live in a world of honey and milk in a very delicate sense, unlike the rich but heavy experience of the Ratna family. Fantastic. Even our bread is scented with all kinds of delicious smells. Our ice cream is colored by beautiful pink lotus-like colors. We cannot wait to eat. Sweet music is playing in the background constantly. When there is no music, we listen to the whistling of the wind around our Padma environment, and it becomes beautiful music as well. Even though we're not musicians, we compose all kinds of music. We wish we were a poet or a fantastic lover. So this very much plays into the modern person's appreciation of comforts, luxury, sensuality, and so forth. So of course here, this is attained not through grasping, but you can say a muscle of appreciation. So Padma, when freed from the grasping quality, is then the delight in the phenomenal world. The next family is the karma family, which is a different kettle of fish. In this case, we're not talking about karmic debts or karmic consequences. Karma, in this sense, simply means action. So normally when we talk about karma, this simply means the actions that are very often, when we're talking about, you could say, the samsara context, it's the actions that drive effects. That means everything that we experience doesn't come out of the blue. It comes on the basis of causes and conditions. And likewise, also our actions create what will be the result that comes next. So in that sense, in the ordinary limited, confused experience of samsara, karma is associated with particular patterns of action. Whereas in the enlightened aspect, then karma is the natural unfolding of enlightened action. So Trungpa here continues, the neurotic quality of action or activity is connected with jealousy, comparison, and envy. And here we're talking about the psychological dispositions. What I was just saying in terms of karma, in the samsaric sense, is more general, but here the Trungpa is more talking about the terms of the 5 families. Then the neurotic quality of the karma family is jealousy. He goes on to say, the enlightened aspect of karma is called the wisdom of all-accomplishing action. It is a transcendental sense of complete fulfillment of action without being hassled or pushed into neurosis. It is natural fulfillment in how we relate with our world. In either case, whether we relate to karma family on the transcendental level or the neurotic level, karma is the energy of efficiency. So we come across karma phenomena all the time in terms of busyness. So it can be neurotic busyness, but it can also be then enlightened activity. If we have a karma family neurosis, we feel highly irritated if we see a hair on our teacup. First, we think our cup is broken and that the hair is a crack in the cup. Then there is some relief. Our cup is not broken. It just has a piece of hair on the side. But then when we begin to look at the hair on our cup of tea, we become angry all over again. We would like everything very efficient, pure, and absolutely clean. However, if we do achieve cleanliness, then that cleanliness itself becomes a further problem. We feel insecure because there's nothing to administer, nothing to work on. We constantly try to check every loose end. Being very keen on efficiency, we get hung up on it. If we meet a person who is not efficient, who does not have his or her life together, we regard them as a terrible person. We would like to get rid of such inefficient people. And certainly we do not respect them, even if they're talented musicians or scientists or whatever they may be. On the other hand, if someone has immaculate efficiency, we begin to feel that he or she is a good person to be with. We would like to associate ourselves exclusively with people who are responsible and clean-cut. However, we find that we're envious and jealous of such efficient people. We want others to be efficient, but not more efficient than we are. So this maybe we can recognize. Anyway, that's a portrait of karma neurosis. Trungpa Rinpoche continues, the epitome of karma family neurosis is wanting to create a uniform world, even though we might have very little philosophy, very little meditation, very little consciousness in terms of developing ourselves. We feel that we can handle our world properly. We have composure and we relate properly with the whole world. And we're resentful that everybody else does not see things in the same way that we do. Karma is connected with the element of wind. The wind never blows in all directions, but it blows in one direction at a time. This is the one-way view of resentment and envy, which picks on one little fault or virtue and blows it out of proportion. With karma wisdom, the quality of resentment falls away, but the quality of energy, fulfillment of action, and openness remains. In other words, the active aspect of wind is retained so that our energetic activities touches everything in its path. We see the possibilities inherent in situations and automatically take the appropriate course. Action fulfills a purpose. So by the way, Trungpa Rinpoche mentioned in the context of the Vajra family how it's associated with water. In the context of the Ratna family, the element associated is earth. And also we saw Padma family is associated with fire, and then Karma family is associated with the wind. So within Buddhist science, Buddhist perspective on the phenomenal world, in terms of what we could talk of as matter or the elements, we talk about 5 elements. And so these 5 elements in their pure nature are then these 5 families. And these then in their intrinsic, you could say refined conditions, are then associated with colors, light. So we would say the Vajra family is associated with white, the white light. Ratna associated with yellow light. Padma family, red light. Padma family, red light, and Karma family, green. And so in the context of then the 5 families, we're really covering all the you could say the more gross aspects of the phenomenal world, and also their most subtle aspects in terms of identifying these 5 aspects. The 5th family is called the Buddha family. It is associated with the element of space. Buddha energy is the foundation or the basic space. Actually, I'm going to stop here just because it's 10:02 and there might be a few. Let me just see. There might be a few questions. Yeah, I think there is. So let's just stop here at the Buddha family for today. And just go through the questions. Actually, sometimes Buddha family is described first. This can be a little bit, this sort of varies, but sometimes we would first talk about the Buddha family at the center of the mandala, but that's not that important. Can you say a bit about how to view a teacher as your root teacher? Well, we're gonna study with a lot of different teachers, and particularly actually in the context of, we were talking a little bit about this non-sectarian or ecumenical movement of the Rime, and that was very much actually encouraging that people study with different traditions. And particularly my own teacher, Dilgu Khyentse Rinpoche and Tsongsi Khyentse Rinpoche, always warmly encouraged studying with different teachers. To Chögyam Rinpoche, he would define root teacher as the one who introduces us to the nature of our mind. And specifically then, or in general also, we just would say that our main teacher is then our root teacher. And we would say all the other teachers, of course, have tremendous merit, but we would say then they are manifestations of or expressions of the root teacher. And that's also where we would even say the phenomenal world is seen as an expression of the teacher. The family metaphor is wonderful. It is. You know, when we talk about, oh, son or daughter of noble family, the family here refers to Buddha nature. It's the DNA of awakening that's basic to us. So you could say we're all one family. All beings belong to this, you could even say, caste of enlightenment. The teaching here, then there's another question. The teaching here is that the anger of Vajra neurosis is associated with water. I would have imagined fire. Would you say more about the connection to water in this light? I guess what Trungpa was saying is that turbulent water has tremendous power and clarity, but if it's muddled, then it's where you could say there's this quality of anger. Whereas when it's not muddied, then it's very clear and powerful. Yes, I guess you could say fire, except that fire comes with a particular temperature, warmth. And the nature of the Vajra family is so that it's devoid, you could say, of being one temperature or another. The water takes on its temperature according to, it can be both cold, it can be warm. Interestingly, also, it can become rigid, as we talked about. This Vajra quality can be rigid, that's where it becomes ice. Fire has this warm quality, so that's where I think that's more about the Padma quality of you could say warming, creating the foundation for nourishing and so forth. Whereas Vajra in its clarity is more neutral, just crystal quality. I would recommend reading the last chapter of Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. It's a chapter called Tantra. And in there, Trungpa elaborates further on the images that we have for the five families here. Can the neurotic Ratna quality be also a form of extreme greed? Yeah, very much. It's very much this of just not having any limits in terms of how much you want to expand yourself. So it's less speedy and neurotic, like we saw in the Karma, in this case of the Karma family. But it's perhaps not extreme in the sense of being ambitious, but it just naturally keeps expanding. There's that slightly lazy, rich quality to it. Again, for these, I would recommend reading this chapter by Trungpa on the five families. Can we see the predominance of one of the five families as changing over our lifetime, i.e. at times perhaps we can be more Padma, at times perhaps Ratna? Very much, and we could very well see all five. When I read these, I always see all the five neurotic aspects. I'm thinking, oh, I'm really a Vajra person. Oh no, I'm actually quite Ratna or Padma or Karma or whatever, you know. So there's always a sense of, well, for myself, there's very much a sense that they're all there. But yes, we could, of course, at times be, and during the particular context, we can be more Ratna, more Padma, etc. Teacher, can we have the text? Look, the text that we're studying presently, you can get as Kindle, so you can download it. Otherwise, you can buy the hard copy. So yes, yeah. So it's called Journey Without Goal. Hi Jakob, are specific teachings for each of the 5 Buddha families? Yes, there are actually, particularly in the Vajrayana. We actually talk about sadhanas that focus on these five families. So, for example, you would have practices of the various herukas and the various deities and so on associated with particular families. For example, practice of Avalokiteshvara associated with the Padma family. You would have practices of Vajrakilaya associated with the Kama family, Vajrasattva, the Vajra family, and so on. Hi Jakob, can you belong to different families in different times of your life? Yes, you can. Not only in your life, but continually. I'm in New York City. Can you recommend a teacher? I'm 72 years old, and have studied books for many, many years. That's a really good question. I would say thanks to modern technology and so on, we could actually have teachers, even though we can't meet them personally. It's difficult. Right now in New York City, I wouldn't know exactly who to go to. Maybe somebody can recommend. But there are always Dharma groups. For example, there's Tongsagen Rinpoche has students in New York. There's also groups like Shambhala Training and so on, all of which really represent a living environment. And that's where you could say it's a little bit like apprenticing, where you start on the periphery and then you begin to approach then the center, which is the teacher. I wish I could recommend somebody. I've heard of great masters who lived in New York City. I remember Tongsagen Rinpoche talking about one very great master who was, how do you say, clipping tickets down in the subway. So some of these great teachers live there very inconspicuously. But anyway, you can shoot me a mail, and I can recommend just what comes to mind first is Siddhartha's Intents, little sangha there, and then you have groups like Shambhala Training, which are very well organized, really offer very, very good living sangha situation and also teachings practice context. Is the particular Buddha family indicated with one's 3-part refuge name given by the root teacher? Not necessarily. You could possibly have it when you receive a Vajrayana name. Like in some empowerments, you'll actually receive a particular name. And that could be seen as being reflecting one's particular Buddha nature or Buddha family. Yeah. I missed the contact. Yes, I can understand that. And so I hope you succeed. But like I said, I think the entrance door might be beginning to first make the aspiration. May I meet a teacher? And then I think the sort of more practical application is to hook up with sanghas. And so, yes, I would, of course, I'm sitting here as someone my experience with the Siddhartha Intent, Tongsagen Rinpoche, Dilbu Rinpoche, Jigme Khyentse Rinpoche, and so on, is I know my family, I trust them. But of course, there are also other families out there, and depends on one's particular karma. So I would recommend my particular mob, and also I would recommend the Shambhala family. Is there a hierarchy between different families? Why are the bodhisattvas inside each family not in union? There's no hierarchy, certainly not. This is all aspects of Buddha nature. Why are the bodhisattvas inside each family not in union? Oh, I'm not sure what you mean with that. If you're talking about the Vajradhatu Mandala, where you have the 42 peaceful deities, the bodhisattvas are actually, even though they're not depicted as such, they are actually in union with their consort, where the bodhisattvas represent respectively subject and the consort represents object. luminosity and emptiness, and so forth. So yeah, and raging sea storm. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Thank you for being there in time. How can Ratna family being associated with equality? Does equality mean equanimity? I have to say I haven't thought about that. It's equality in the sense that everything is accommodated by the Ratna. So there's this wealth that only sees, you could say, that only sees, you could say, potential and goodness in everything. And that's where there's this immense sense of wealth and richness. So that could be equanimity as well. In Tibetan, Nyamni Yeshe is actually equanimity. So I guess, yes, equality could mean equanimity. Which family are the long life Buddhas associated with? Well, generally the Padma family, like the Buddha Amitayus. Then again, you also have white Amitayus. So I think that we would say even Amitayus actually exists in all 5 families. Yeah. Also, can they be associated with different parts of the body, like an astral body, channels, etc.? Well, in Buddhism, we don't talk so much about astral bodies, but we talk about the subtle body, which is like a bit like the meridians or the nadis in yoga. And so we associate the elements of the body. Let's say solid is earth, fluid is water, heat is fire, movement is wind, and you could say the cavities of the body is then space. So we would say the 5 elements and so on, the 5 families are associated with the components of our body on both the gross level and also on the more subtle level. I think grandson of Dudjom Rinpoche lives in New York. That's true, actually. Yes. If you have the chance, there's somebody called Jampel Dorje. It's a very great master, grandson of Dudjom Rinpoche, and son of Tunlinobu Rinpoche, and Tunlinobu Rinpoche's wife, Jamyang. And just don't tell him where you heard about this. Some teachers, some of the really great teachers, like to keep a very low profile. But yes, since somebody brings it up here, I'd like to say I warmly recommend this teacher. We have an SI practice group in New York City. Wonderful. We are only meeting online now, though, unfortunately. New York Shambhala Center is closed. Okay. So anyway, look, go on siddharthasintent.org. You can, yeah, and there would be some information there on their website. We also have Shambhala. Yeah, I forget what did it call these days? Shambhala.org, I guess. They would have some word. Tibet House, Tibet House in New York City. That's right, where you have Bob Thurman, who's a very wonderful, gregarious, and colorful communicator of Buddhism. Delightful to listen to. At Tibet House, New York City, yeah, very much worth checking that out. Shambhala Center doesn't exist in New York City anymore. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I wrote to SI in New York City and did not get a reply, unfortunately. Aha, okay. We'll get on to them. They should reply. Yeah. Give them a few days, but if it's more than that, then send them a mail again. Pester them. Say hello from me. I told you to pester them. What about teachers in New Zealand or groups can meet in person? Well, there is Siddhartha's Intent in New Zealand. If you go on the again Siddhartha's Intent website, there are some people there. Yeah. Dzogchen Ponlo Rinpoche at Nalanda Bodhi in Connecticut is excellent. Okay, great. So somebody needs, so as you all know, this is all, when we have these webinars, if you can't attend live, then there's a recording that's available, yeah. It's usually I upload it within a day or two after the event. During empowerment, stick is shown in mandala pointing to the cardinal points. Does this have something to do with families? Yes, very much. That is where we would say sometimes we could emphasize a particular Buddha family when we're doing sadhana practice, and this is where this is actually the tooth stick. Sometimes we throw a flower, and depending on where it lands on the mandala, it indicates the particular Buddha family. Sometimes also we throw a sort of a large toothpick, like a neem stick you used to have in India. You know, in India you clean your teeth with neem, these sticks, you know, these things you chew on, and then you. So anyway, in tantric ritual or tantric empowerment, then you would have something that resembles this that you then throw onto the mandala, and where it points indicates the particular family whose practice you should emphasize. And then there's Foundation for Preservation of Mahayana Tradition Centers in New York City. Yeah, there's FPMT also. Yes, so all of these, there should be quite a bit of Buddhism happening in New York City, but of course the situation now with COVID makes it difficult to do physical meetings. Before one can experience these consciousnesses, is initiation necessary? Well, how does a teacher determine if the student is ready or not? Well, presently, we're talking about we're talking phenomenology. We're talking about what we're experiencing right now. So there's nothing about the way it's actually applied. Before we begin to approach the whole notion of empowerment and so on, we need to first have some experience of our consciousness and beginning to, you could say, sense the possibility that we could work with that. And that is what Trungpa Rinpoche would like to convey here. And that will then lead us to wishing to pursue the path. So this is on the basis then of the preliminary practices and so on, we then prepare for the tantric journey. And that's where we have the practice of Nindro and the Vajrayana preliminaries. Is hesitancy or fear associated with any particular family? Yes, it is associated somewhat with the Vajra family, where there's a little bit wishing to take a distance and assess what's going on. But we can also see this associated with the other families as well. But I think normally we would associate fear with the Vajra family. It's sort of this assessing and trying to see clearly. Yeah. I was actually introduced to SI by a friend in New York. She sent me lots of links. Okay, well, that clearly indicates that SI New York City occasionally does respond, I guess. There's an email address of New Zealand's branch from SI website, but no one responds this email. I sent several emails before. All right, well, in that case, then just actually, there's some alternatives. And for those who are practicing Nindro, we're going to be starting up a program that will actually enable you to have some people that you can connect with. So if the sort of headquarters in New Zealand isn't responding, then we could set you up with a Dharma buddy of some sort. Yeah. How do you spell? Is it Dongsa Jampal Rinpoche? Yes, that's it. I got response from Australia though. Now I am an SI Australia Sangha brother. Oh, that's good. At least the Australians are doing their job. Send me an email. I can relate to New York City. Okay. Okay, I'm at Jakob, Jakob, at si.org.au. Okay. Okay. All right. We'll have to conclude here. Anyway, if there's anything in this context, please send me a mail. Also, if sometimes in the context of these classes, I'll say I'm going to upload this, and I make all sorts of promises, and then I might forget. I did do a fair few of these programs, so it does happen I forget. So if that's the case, please don't hesitate to just shoot me a mail, send me a mail, and I'll get onto it sooner or later. It will happen. Okay. Thank you. We'll dedicate. Through this virtue may all beings throughout existence awaken together without a single being left behind. In the pure realm of luminous essence, the ground of the great perfection, may they remain inseparable from the kayas and wisdoms. Through all our births, wherever we may be born, may we be endowed with the 7 good qualities of the higher realms. As soon as we are born, may we meet with the Dharma and have the freedom to practice it properly. At that time, may we please the holy gurus and practice the Dharma throughout the day and night. Realizing the Dharma and accomplishing its essential meaning, may we cross the ocean of existence in that life. Thoroughly teaching the holy Dharma in this world, may we never tire of accomplishing the benefit of others. By this vast benefit of others, without partiality or bias, may all attain Buddhahood together.